Chuck, is it me or is it a beautiful day outside today?
It has finally stopped raining here.
Oh,
Yeah.
when Victoria says I'm going to be paradise, it does not mess around. The Garden of Eden, I think, is jealous outside right now.
Yeah. There's a lot of green, which is nice, but the rain is tiring.
Yes. And the flowers are blooming and it's wonderful. And so it's almost hard in this idyllic space to come to the sort of realization that, this year we have had a number of conflicts that have had, I'm just going to call them global effect.
Absolutely.
I don't think we have a world war or anything that would even remotely come to that. But when we have war as an activity, it affects so many different things that we don't think it will affect. Supply lines, fuel lines, energy, social, how we are getting along, allies, how we are interconnectedly getting along. But in these spaces, we've had this happen to this planet over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And there are lessons we've learned before that may not seem right in front of us today.
Right.
So one of the things I always like to think about in a moment like today is that, when the Roman emperors used to go on parade, the story, whether it's true or apocrypha, is that there was someone behind them whispering in their ear, this too shall pass.
Right.
Because, it might be glorious today, but we evolve and we move forward.
Right.
So as a planet, as a topic, as a space to really have a dialogue, because that's what we said. Nobody here praises war.
Right.
But we need to have a dialogue about it. What are some lessons we can learn from some of the global situations of today?
Well, so we're going to do like a 4-hour podcast today.
If you want, welcome to part 1 in our 10-part series.
So much to learn. But here's the sad part from my perspective as a trained historian, Marty, that not one of the lessons to learn is new. That's the sad part, right? It's not true that history repeats itself, because it doesn't. But what does repeat itself is the lessons that are available to learn. And we just, as a species, we seem almost incapable. Now, part of it, I think, is hubris from our, us believing we're the most intelligent creatures God ever created. And so obviously I'm too smart to make that mistake again. Watch this. Right? But I was listening to a discussion between, I believe he's American, and Professor Sir Niall Ferguson now, the Scottish historian who teaches in the US. And he was talking about the parallel between what's going on right now with the Straits of Hormuz and what happened in the Straits in the Bosphorus, and what brought Gallipoli, the disaster that you and I were talking about Australia just moments ago. That the Australians paid and the New Zealanders paid a heavy price for a failed strategy. Now, at that time, it happened to be wheat was what made the world go round, because you needed wheat to feed the workers that ran your factories and your society and all your servants. The world was not addicted to oil yet. We were still using muscle power for labor. And the problem was that the Turks controlled the Bosphorus, and wheat was coming out of the Bosphorus, and the First World War was raging, and it was such a complicated situation. And a young Winston Churchill, as First Lord of the Admiralty, decided that he was going to fix this by seizing the Bosphorus. Well, didn't go so well. He underestimated what the Turks could and would do. And which is surprising, because to give him credit, at that point in his life, I think he thought he was a better strategic thinker than he really was. I've read several of his biographies, including the 3-volume set by Manchester, which I highly recommend. I don't think he fully understood that he didn't know what he didn't know. It came later. He understood better as he aged because he certainly made enough mistakes for one lifetime. And what we've seen in the last month, or since we started, since the last time we laid down a track, people are accusing the American military of not having planned this out. That is manifestly untrue. You've worked with the American military. I've worked with the American military. They are professionals in every sense of the word. They have 5 war colleges where they teach senior officers about planning and consequences and, decision trees and all of that stuff. You can bet every dollar in your bank account that they planned it all out. Whether they were listened to, that's a different matter. And, of course, their military is like our military. They are professionals and they work for the civilian authority. You give the civilian authority your best advice, and if they don't take it, then as long as it's not illegal, you do what you're told, which is what's happening right now. And unfortunately, one of the unintended consequences that I guess the civilian authority, to use a broad term, didn't fully consider or maybe fully appreciate after it was briefed was that this was going to affect more than 3 countries. Right? This was going to be a knock-on effect that, and it obviously it's going to affect all of the oil shippers in and out of the Persian Gulf, but it affects the world spot price for oil. That's the part that a lot of people, even to this day, don't fully understand. I listened to somebody at coffee break the other day saying, I don't get it. I mean, we produce more oil than we can use. So why are we paying more for oil when we've got more than we can use? So I was one of a couple of people that explained it to our colleagues, saying that, oil is priced on the world market, right? There's 2 different prices for oil. There's West Texas Intermediate, and then there's Brent crude. And it depends on what grade of oil you're talking about. Unfortunately, most of the oil that Canada produces is the coarsest type, and it sells at a discount because it can only be refined in certain places. But the price of that stuff is through the roof as well. And so if you are an oil producer in Canada, we have a free market economy. The government isn't going to say, well, no, you can't sell that to Canadians at a different price than you sell it to somebody else. And so you sell it for whatever price you can get. So I heard it explained by an economist in terms that I had not considered before, which was that when you look at it from the macroeconomic and then from the microeconomic, they actually balance each other out. Because, Alberta's getting more tax revenue. Companies are making more money. They're hiring more workers. They're paying workers overtime. So there's a whole lot of guys in Alberta who are going to get new trucks because, all the overtime and the money, right? And companies that are pumping oil in Alberta and the pipeline owners and are going to pay a higher dividend. And the government, both in Alberta and the feds, are collecting more revenue from taxes. That's macro. Micro, you and I are paying more for everything because it's not that, oil is used in everything, but oil is used to transport.
To move everything.
So this issue of, I have on my website posted, I think 3 times on the subject of unintended consequences. And it's a tough thing to learn, but we should have learned by now. We should have figured this out by now. Yet, we seem to, irrespective of country, irrespective of language or culture, we continue to have people who put us in situations and then have them say, that was unexpected.
There's a famous quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson that comes up right here. I I hope I don't misquote him, but it's something to the effect of most people today know enough about a topic to know that I know something about that.
Okay.
But most people today don't know when they don't know enough about a topic to have a solid opinion.
Right.
In other words, we think we know more than we know.
Correct.
If I'm paraphrasing good old Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I think you are. Yeah, I think you are. I mean, the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes, very much.
Is what that describes, right? And the Dunning-Kruger effect, which makes people think that they know more than they do, or are better at something than they are, is not a big deal when your neighbor brags that he's got greener grass because he uses a different kind of lawn fertilizer than you do, and you can have an interesting discussion over the fence about that, and then you walk away and you think, oh, wow, what a potz, and he thinks, boy, Chuck's an idiot. He should use better lawn fertilizer. No big deal. But when the two people that are arguing are opposite sides of the world and both have large militaries and intercontinental ballistic missiles, then it gets serious quickly, like real quick. And that's one of the reasons that, not to go off topic, but that's one of the reasons that I think I've always thought that parliamentary democracies were stronger forms of government than republics. Because if we have a prime minister who leads us down a path that clearly the majority of Canadians disagree with, I mean, I'm not talking about 51-49. I'm talking about 80%, 20%. They start calling their members of parliament, and the members of parliament start to realize that if for no other reason, in self-interest, they can't support this policy, it's time to get rid of this leader, right? I mean, the Brits lost, 4 prime ministers in the last 20 years because they got ejected by their own party, right? It's just that easy. And if the party doesn't get rid of them, then the opposition leadership has an obligation under parliamentary system to force a vote of non-confidence and say, I'm declaring this a vote of non-confidence. I think the House has lost confidence in you, Mr. Prime Minister, and then we can stop it. You cannot do that in a Republican form of government. You cannot do that. So that's one of the reasons I've always thought we have a better form of government than republics do. But that has caused me a lot of concern. I mean, I feel badly, I mean, you were in the military, I was in the military, and I never served in a war zone. I went on UN peacekeeping tours, but I've had sons in war zones, and they both went to Afghanistan, and a lot of sleepless nights. And I feel for the families of those 5,000 Marines that are making their way towards the Strait of Hormuz, because if those Marines do anything other than stay on their ship, not everybody's coming home.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is not going to be like taking Grenada. All right? That worries me.
Yeah. Well, even as you talk there, I'm just thinking about, because you just brought up like the families and the impact, and I'll come back to what you said earlier around unintended consequences. Right. We know combat has intended consequences.
Right.
It's part of the game. I've always said anybody in any combat zone that I served in, I was never like personally mad at them. We all agree. We all shook hands. Combatant against combatant, I have no problem. Combatant against non-combatant,
different story.
I have a very different feeling on that one.
Yeah.
And that's not unintended consequence. It's when we're intending that consequence.
Right.
Because that's not the game of war.
No.
That's not the game of war.
That's criminal act.
That's criminal. But we can go combat to combat and still have respect for each other. And I'm just thinking about like what you said around unintended consequences. So much of war changes our world, but we don't necessarily stop and think about it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah.
I remember, so truth be told, everyone, my parents are pacifists, and they're lovely people. But I remember my mom asked me, what did I do during my entire Gulf trip?
Right.
This is a woman who does not understand combat, could not understand combat. And the only way I could relate it to my mom was, at Christmas, they put those traffic stops out and they're just checking everybody because they know a few of them are going to be drunk. Yeah. We're doing the same thing, but for contraband.
Right.
I didn't say weapons or or terrorists, contraband.
Yeah.
Because that's the way some people can understand some of the things going on today.
Right.
You talked about the economic consequences. We know if you look at the history of gas prices, Gulf War I, the history of gas prices, Gulf War II, massive spikes. They never go back to pre-war level. Like I've never seen it go all the way back. There's decrease.
Yeah.
Certainly pandemic, spike and decrease, but it never goes all the way back.
No.
That is one of those unintended consequences that I think when, to use the pandemic as a space that's safe again, we're going to stay home for 2 weeks, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you do NBCD training before the pandemic?
No.
Oh, okay. So I remember seeing that for the first time. They're all talking 2 weeks. And in my head, I'm like, isn't the Ebola cycle 2 years?
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure you got to go through level 1, level 2, and level 3. That's just for an Ebola. Like, we don't even know this one. Like, they're all talking 2 weeks. And it's because that's how we break down these big, horrible events into a bite-sized chunk. You got to bite the elephant.
That's true.
Yeah. As I think some of the unintended consequences are people just aren't ready for, like, what's going to happen? Like, as an educated man of history, what do you think is going to happen to some of the oil economies when this is done?
Some of the oil economy? You mean the countries that are pumping it out of the ground?
Yeah. Well, right now we know that 20% of everything is held at bay.
Yes.
Are we going to rely on that same 20% the same way afterwards? Are we going to change how we spend? Are we going to change how we buy? What are some of the, because this has happened, like you just said with the wheat markets.
Right.
What has happened there, and what do you foresee happening here?
So I think what will happen is that initially, when there's some kind of resolution, because there will be a resolution, there will not be a victory, as I put in my last post, because in order for there to be a victory, someone has to declare that they've lost. The Iranians are never going to declare that they've lost, right? So there will be some kind of cessation of hostilities, and we will return to the situation antebellum. So status quo antebellum. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but what that will mean to all of the countries, particularly the Europeans and the Indians and the Pakistanis and the Chinese, and they will start getting oil again because they so drastically need it. Japan has no national energy source. All the oil they get comes from ships. So they're going to be hurting within the next 6 weeks. Everybody will go back to people will remember this short-term pain, and they'll find some way to stock up, right? Because you can only stock up so much.
Yeah.
Because not everybody has the salt domes like they do in the States where they fill them with oil, which, by the way, they forgot to fill before they started this. So they're almost empty already. And we have a national strategic reserve as well. But the Europeans they'll catch up, but they will also, in my opinion, they will accelerate getting off of oil and gas, right? They have been working at it assiduously, to use one of my favorite words. Nobody's doing it as fast as China. China has beat the world in coming away from coal and oil. Now, it's going to take longer because they have such a huge country. But I think you will see all European countries. The Germans have already reversed their opinion on nuclear power stations. We're going to see more of those built more quickly. These small stations are going to be built. We are going to wean ourselves off oil quicker than anybody thought possible because we don't want to go through this again.
So you bring up something really good there, which I really love, which is sometimes the unintended consequences push us in a negative direction. Sometimes the unintended consequences push us in a positive direction.
Good point.
And I think about the state of aeronautics and airplanes at the beginning of World War II,
Right.
and air power at the end of World War II.
Phenomenal leap.
Yeah. Sometimes the things we don't know can have us be creative, that mother of invention kind of thing. Is there something from this that you think that we might be able to invent going forward for the betterment of our species?
Right off the top of my head, battery technology.
Mm.
So I just read yesterday, because I've been thinking that I can't run my lovely gas-driven Mercedes forever, that maybe it's time to switch over to a hybrid, and maybe from a hybrid to a fully electric. And I miss my truck. And Ford has announced that in 2027, they're going to introduce a small pickup truck, fully electric, and that they are not just going to convert like a Maverick or a Ranger. They have got a whole team building, for the first time in North America, an electric vehicle that isn't a conversion. They're starting with, how many wheels? Okay, we want 4. Okay, we got 4. What are the wheels going to look like? They are changing everything.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by this. So, and one of the things that they've done is they have pushed a new type of battery technology, which is 30% lighter than NiCad. And there's a year between now and then. Who knows what they're going to discover in the intervening year? But if you have a choice, okay, well, we got to spend money on this. We haven't spent money on this because there's been no oil. Spend the money on R&D. We got a lot of bright university kids and scientists and labs all over the place. I think batteries is going to change everything. That's what I think.
So for your average Canadian sitting at home today, what's the message about this too shall pass? Because everything good, I always come back to the glory days.
Right.
Okay. Huge tales of glory all through Homer.
Yep.
And this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And there's huge days of, we could call it, the Great Depression, war. These things happen to our planet, and these too shall pass.
Yes.
So in getting ready for the best of times or the worst of times, if I was Dickens, what could I do going next?
Well, that's a good question, Marty. And when you said glory days, it took me to Bruce Springsteen. I'm a Springsteen fan. So let me answer with another favorite song, not by Springsteen, which is These Are the Good Old Days, right? I mean, when we were living in what we now look back on as the good old days, we didn't know they were the good old days. And yet we think of them that way. And these too will someday be the good old days. And so I think the message, if you're asking me to give our listeners a message, my message would be to stay positive, not to take counsel of your fears, because that is a downward spiral. That will take you nowhere good. That is not to say that everything's fantastic. We don't need to worry about anything. That's not true either. Worry can be productive. It prepares us for things that we need to be prepared for, the unexpected. But generally speaking, count your blessings. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but I can't tell you the number of times in an international setting that I, over a cup of coffee or during a lecture or over a beer, when people ask me about Canada, I always say, in the Old Testament, God promised the Israelites the land of milk and honey. I said, I don't have to look for it. I know where the land of milk and honey is. It's Canada. We have everything anyone could ever wish for. And we have it today. Nothing's perfect. Right? Enjoy your life, right? I'll end with another song. Not Bruce Springsteen, but James Taylor, right? The essence of life is enjoying the passage of time.
Wow. I really hear your space on mindset. Our mindset can be fearful, or our mindset can be gratitude.
Right.
And thank you for that message of gratitude.
Hey, Marty, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Until next time.
Cheers, buddy.